Hello, beautiful people, and welcome, to yet another chill Abyss video, where I just run through some teams that I enjoy playing, and really that's kind of all there is to it, so let's get right into it. Today we're going to be playing two 4-star only teams. We're going to be playing Beidou Heizou official Yao Yao, as well as Channeling Bennett Sucrose. So, alright, so basically Heizou Aggravate and Sucrose National. These are not the most optimal versions of these teams. This team, I actually wouldn't change anything, but for this one, if you have Kazuha, you can use him over Heizou. I'm only using Heizou so that I can do some 4-star only teams. Obviously, if your Heizou's level 90, that would help a lot because you are getting a decent amount of damage from your Aggravate reactions, but level 80 is good enough. I did also change a few of my things around, so I'm only using 4-star weapons as well. Yeah, so let's just get right into it. So we're doing our usual national setup, trying to set up our quad vape. Only got 3 vase, but that's enough to phase, so it's fine. Keep attacking him so that... that's unlucky. I'm just gonna wait until he does his attack before I Bennett burst, because he's gonna move. And here, I didn't want to wait too long, because I knew he was going to move again. Hope I got my burst back on channeling, but I'm not entirely sure. Although, because we're against the crab on the next chamber, it's not the end of the world if I don't start with it, because really, really high, it's like 140, I think, % power resistance before you break the shield anyways, and it takes a little bit to break the shield. For this one, we can just try to kill one of these before they start doing their grouping attack. Now, obviously, if you watched the last video, you'll know this, but I am very lazy in making sure that my Yao Yao is on the right set. Now, because we're actually getting Hyper Blooms here... sorry, give me a second. Because we're actually getting Hyper Blooms here, Yao Yao being on Deepwood would help a lot. And again, right, Heizou being leveled as well, because Heizou is the one who's triggering most of the Hyper Blooms here, but it's not the end of the world. We still have enough raw electro damage to not have to worry about it too much. Now we just make sure that we stay close to the ones that are not the big guy, because the big guy will go to you eventually. He's the tankiest of them, but he's very, very annoying. He moves a lot, he doesn't stay in place. He doesn't attack this one, which is just also incredibly annoying. And it staggers you a lot. I really do not like this enemy. I'm pretty sure I've talked about that before in the last Abyss video, but this is like one of my least favorite enemies I've ever put in. Not because it's all that dangerous or that tanky, it's just annoying, but that's fine.
Let me read you a verse. Rain outlines your fate. Know my sword. Animal hyperstasis simulation. Absorption test.
Okay, we get a very good timing on our break. Our shield break. Oh no, my R5 Sack Sword did not proc, which is unfortunate. It happens, but it's definitely not something you're ever happy to see. My ER is a bit too low to get my burst back here, so... Hello? We can still get a reasonable amount of damage just from, yeah. Hey. I don't really want to use burst here. I shouldn't need to, as long as I get my E.
No, my sword.
There we go. As long as I get my sock sword proc, shouldn't need to. You can kind of brute force the crab without breaking the shield, but not with pyro damage. Because with other elements, the resistance is at 90, which is pretty crippling. But if you have VV, you can reduce that to 50, which is still bad, but with enough investment, you can brute force it. But the power resistance is at 140. You can reduce it to 100, and the way that it works, resistance above 75%, it's not the same way, so you're not doing 0 damage, but your damage is heavily reduced to the point where it's almost impossible to brute force it with pyro damage. But because Heizou does a lot of damage himself, I can still kind of brute force it. Oh yeah, it's this thing.
Coming was foretold.
My royal
The eternal oasis. Get moving. Fracture. As you wish. The eternal oasis. Bring it on.
Okay. We go through this, now we... Oh right, it's this, for war. I'm gonna try to... Oh, come on. There we go. Try to break the Geo Shield with our Claymore attacks. Now, unfortunately, here, Heizou's grouping, not the best. So we're struggling a little bit in terms of that. But it's still alright. We're just losing a little bit of damage. Now they're basically grouped, so it's fine, but... Can I... But obviously here, this chamber is one of the chambers where you notice a little bit where Kazuha would help a lot over Heizou. But that's alright, not too big of a deal, because Beidou is pretty much hard carrying this one. And finally, last chamber. My characters are a little low, but it's not really that big of a deal, because I've got Venom Burst. For this one, we gotta make sure this one is dashing towards the other ones.
Absorption test. The show's only just begun.
And not away from them,
Rain outlines
so that we can get a nice little kill on everyone at the same time.
Let's light it up.
Like that. And then here, we'll just delay our setup a little bit. Yeah, just to make sure that we can get our double swirl on both enemies, not just the big guy.
Rain outlines your fate.
Okay, and we're basically done. Let's grab our particles, because I'm not sure if I got my Beidou Burst back. And here is just a question of getting past it. It's a bit annoying.
To ashes.
Here, we're gonna try to proc our official Ascension 4 as much as possible, so we can
Midnight, fantastic.
get this done early. Try to use our iframes to avoid the stagger. The damage isn't that big of a deal, but the stagger does annoy me quite a lot, so...
On, reveal thyself.
I really thought that was gonna be a perfect parry there, but I guess not.
Shadow with stay put.
Here I'm gonna keep my Beidou Burst because it's 4 units, so I can use it to basically instantly destroy this thing and get a parry that does a lot of damage instead of wasting my parry on the shield. And now he's not gonna shield up for a little bit, and that should be more than enough time to kill him.
Wings of darkness. Eyes on me.
Let's try to get our parry. Alright! Cool stuff, cool stuff. But yeah, so obviously, like I mentioned, Heizou here not as good as Kazuha, but it's not that big of a deal because, while there are some places where the grouping does matter, there's not that many in this Abyss. And especially when you're playing Sucrose National on the other side, you're not struggling on that side. So you've got a little bit more time to spare on the other one. In a perfect world, right? You could have 2 Sucroses and use Sucrose on both sides, and that would be even better. But we don't live in a perfect world. We gotta make do with what we got, and Heizou's not bad. Like, I've talked about this before, but both Heizou and Anemo MC, they're characters that they are actually really good. It's just other alternatives are better, right? Sucrose and Kazuha are just better. So there's never really an optimal team that's going to use Heizou or that's going to use Anemo MC. But they're still good characters. If you don't have the alternatives, you should use them. You will clear. They perform well. They're just not as good. Anyways, let's go through the builds real quick. I've got Serpent Spine on Beidou. In this team, you could actually pretty easily get away with Rain Slasher. I don't use Rain Slasher because Serpent Spine is a little bit better, but more importantly, because my crit rate emblem circlets are dog shit. They have a lot of ER, which is nice, but that's all they have. 18 ER and nothing else. 23 ER, a little bit of attack and EM, but like it's just ER, and the others are crit damage. And it's really hard for me to get a good crit ratio with Rain Slasher if I'm using a crit damage circlet, right? Even with the crit rate weapon, I'm still a little bit below 1 to 2. I'm at like 1 to 2 point something, right? But Rain Slasher is really not that big of a downgrade over Serpent Spine in a team like this. Heizou, he's on Fav, just Fav is Fav. You can kind of get away with a lot of different things. You can build him attack and build him EM. It doesn't really matter. Just make sure he's on 4VV. You can use him on Sac, you can use him on a damage weapon if you're building him attack. It really doesn't matter that much. Official, I have her on Viridescent Hunt because my Stringless isn't leveled, but Stringless is actually a bit more damage. And artifact sets, Golden Troop. She doesn't have the best Golden Troop set yet, but it's not bad either, right? We're getting carried a little bit by by our off piece, but we've got some pretty decent pieces. Like this is really good. This is decent, but for an onset goblet, considering it was released such a short time ago, it's actually pretty good. This is really good, and this is pretty good. All in all, just a fairly decent set, but nothing that's all that unrealistic. Yao Yao, she's on Fav. And then, yeah, we don't talk about this. I mentioned this in the last video as well, but I'm just too lazy to put Yao Yao on a set and stick to it. It doesn't really matter. Specifically in this Abyss, it does kind of matter, because alright, like I was saying when I was running through it, on the first chamber, you're against enemies that are infused with Hydro. And against those enemies, you can't trigger, like you can't get Aggravates and Spreads because they keep their Hydro aura, which is going to wipe the Quicken. But you will get Seeds, and you will Hyper Bloom them with your Electro Swirls, which means that especially if you're building Heizou EM, they're going to do a lot of damage, and that's going to get significantly increased if you go Deep Wood. Heizou C6, no, Heizou is Constellation 0. I guess I should show the constellations as well. Heizou is C0, Yao Yao is C0, Beidou and Fischl are both C6. I'd say for Beidou, honestly, you're not going to notice that much of a difference between C2 and C6. Like, there is one. C5 and 6 are pretty useful, and they will increase her personal damage a decent amount. But in terms of team DPS, it's really not that huge of a difference. So, as long as you have C2, you've got what you need. For Fischl, obviously, her C6 does help with uptime and number of Aggravate procs, but it's really not that big of a deal if you don't have it. Obviously, it does help to have it, but the team is still good without it. All right, let's move on to the other team. So, I changed my Bennett to Blackcliff Longsword because my Sapwood is not level 90 because I'm too lazy to level it. But you should be using Sapwood if you have it, just because it gives ER, and the ER is more useful than the crit damage on this. Obviously, I'd use Aquila, which is my highest base attack weapon, but I wanted to do 4-star weapons only. Instructor. This is actually something that is pretty important for National, like Sucrose National. Having Bennett on Instructor, and as you're going to see later, Xingqiu on Noblesse, helps a lot, because not only does it make your Xiangling do more damage, but it also makes your Xingqiu do more front-loaded damage with his E. He does less damage with his burst, but you have more front-loaded damage with your E, and like I showed against Kenki at the beginning, I mean, I got a triple vape, but it kind of doesn't matter if I get the 4th one, because I still phase it with just 3. But you can get up to 4 vapes if you're using Sac Sword Xingqiu at the very, very beginning of your rotation. And Noblesse 20% attack applies to it, but also Instructor's 120 EM. So having Noblesse and Instructor on your team makes it so that your Xingqiu E hurts a lot more. So that's a pretty big deal, and that's something that you should very much consider. Xiangling, she's on Deathmatch. You could use Dragon's Bane pretty safely. It's also very good. I'm not using Dragon's Bane for the same reason why it would be difficult for me to use Rain Slasher on Beidou. I just don't have good crit rate emblem circlets. That would work for her very well. I've got a really strong Xiangling build. It's the kind of build where, like, if you're only looking at crit value, it's not that good. But that's because I've got a bunch of EM and attack rolls and ER rolls. I don't have many wasted rolls on this build. I have a few, but it's really not that many. This is actually a very strong Xiangling build. But yeah, obviously, if I had a better crit rate circlet, I could use that Dragon's Bane. Oh, I mean, the catch, obviously, as well. The catch is also a very good weapon. I have not unlocked fishing yet, So I don't have the catch, but if you have it, obviously you should use it. Sucrose, she is on Sackfrag. Now, ideally you want to use her on TDDS. Personally, I like having that additional like flexibility in my rotations, additional grouping that Sackfrag gives me. It helps me set up my Guoba swirls without having to worry about missing it, because if I f it up, I've got another 2 chances to get it. All in all, it's not the optimal weapon, but for like a comfort clear, once you're already invested enough that the whether or not you're gonna clear isn't actually the question, it's just how annoying is it gonna be. I like Sackfrag a lot, but I would definitely recommend TDDS if you're on the lower end of investment. And then Sing So on Sack Sword. You don't really want to use Sack Sword on this team unless it's R3 plus, because at R3 it's a 22-second cooldown, which you can make work with your rotations. However, before that, at R2 and at R1, it's 26 and 30 seconds respectively cooldown, and that makes it very, very difficult to actually have one every rotation. And then on top of that, it's also less likely that it procs, right? So if that's your situation, just use Fav, even R1 Fav. But if you have R3 plus Sack Sword, you should use that. It helps you, like I said earlier, front load your damage a lot. It's very nice. I like it a lot. He is on 4-piece Noblesse, a pretty decent 4-piece Noblesse. And again, very similarly, there's a lot of EM and attack rolls and not that many crit rolls, but like I'm getting 100 EM from my substats, which helps with the nuke on the E quite a bit. Yeah, that's it for the builds. In terms of cons, all of these characters are C6. Sucrose doesn't need any cons. C1, just like Sackfrag, makes things a little bit more comfortable, and it gives you some room to, if you've got your Guoba Swirl. Bennett's constellations don't matter that much. Obviously, C6 helps with power damage. C5 helps with burst talent level. C1 helps with burst attack buff. But even if you don't have any cons on Bennett, it's not that insane of a downgrade. Like, you still want to use Bennett in this team. The characters where the cons matter a lot more are Xiangling and Sing So. If you don't have C4 on Xiangling, this team is gonna not feel that great, because your sustained damage takes a pretty big hit. Constellations after that don't really matter. And then with Sing So, there's actually a lot of constellation breakpoints that are really nice. C2, obviously, extends your duration, so you'll get to vape more of your Pyronado. Pretty obvious. C3, more burst damage, but that one's actually not that big of a deal. C4 is a pretty huge deal in this team because you can vape your skill, and you kind of want to vape your skill. So your skill just straight up doing 50% more damage is a pretty big deal. And C6 obviously helps a lot with your energy generation and your damage. You can still play the team with low con Sing So, but Sing So is one of those characters which you should go for constellations on him eventually. He is in the shop rotation, so if you're not at C6 and you want to play teams that use him, which is a lot of teams, yoinking him from the Circulator shop every time he shows up is a very good idea. All in all though, these are fun teams to play. I like them a lot. When I'm not restricting myself, I do play those two teams, like to 4 stars only. I do still play those two teams very often, with the main difference that I usually use Kazuha instead of Heizou. But these are still two teams that I use a lot. They're very good and strong teams. But before I end the video, I might as well show a little, walk you guys through the setup that I do with National, because if you haven't seen me talk about Sucrose National before, you might be a little bit confused as to what the setup is and why it is the way that it is. Let me just get my energy real quick. Basically, the goal that you want, right? The main thing you're aiming for, you want to swirl both Hydro and Pyro. And goal number 2, you want that to happen in as short of a window as possible, but before you start dealing your damage. So the rotation that I've found to work the best for this is to open up with Sing So's Burst, but not use his skill yet. Open up with Sing So's Burst, then use Bennett Burst, use Guoba, go to Sucrose, get a Guoba Swirl, then back to Xiangling, use your Burst, and then back to Sing So. And then you can kind of just swap to whoever. You can swap to Bennett to Battery, stay on Sucrose to extend VV, or spread Hydro, go to Sing So to get your Bennett buff, yeah, like you've got a few options from there. But the setup is pretty much always going to be the same. So Sing So Burst, Bennett Burst, Xiangling Burst, Guoba Swirl, potentially use... I kind of fucked that one up, but it's fine. If you use your Sucrose Burst, you're not going to get as much vape on your Xiangling because it's going to last for a bit longer and it's going to prevent you from applying Hydro because it's going to be infused with Pyro. But in exchange for that, it becomes a lot easier to get more vapes on Sing So's E. Also, while you're using your Bennett Burst and your Guoba, you want to weave in normal attacks to make sure that Hydro is on the enemy when you use when you use your Sucrose E. Now, Guoba Swirl is basically when you time your... You time your Sucrose E so that it hits Guoba while Guoba becomes infused with Pyro, right? If we use Elemental Sight, I'm pretty sure we'll be able to see. Yeah. Guoba becomes infused with Pyro when it's attacking like this. Right? And if you hit Guoba with Sucrose's E while it's infused, you'll get a Pyro Swirl. Right? If you want to learn the timing, you can use Elemental Sight. It can make it a little bit useful to learn the timing. And you want to do this because you want to swirl Hydro and Pyro, and the fastest way to do that is the enemy has Hydro on them and Guoba has Pyro on him. So you can swirl Hydro from the enemy and Pyro from Guoba and get both of them in the same E. Anyways, that's gonna do it. I hope you guys enjoyed the clears, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, YouTube.